Elon Musk, the name that had been synonymous with innovation, tech breakthroughs, and space exploration, had entered yet another famous Manhattan restaurant, a place renowned for its exclusivity and luxurious atmosphere. The New York skyline glittered beyond the restaurant's glass windows as he walked in, casually dressed in a sleek black jacket and his signature jeans. His presence wasn't a surprise to the staff. After all, he was a regular at some of the most prestigious places in the city. But today, something was different. As Elon made his way through the gleaming entrance, a chill seemed to fall over the room. The usual buzz of conversation dimmed, and the clinking of silverware softened. He could feel the eyes of the diners and staff alike. Whispers traveled through the crowd like wildfire, as people exchanged knowing glances. Despite his public persona, Elon wasn't immune to the attention his very presence garnered. But it wasn't the attention he was expecting. Something was off. He approached the hostess stand, ready for the usual pleasantries. However, the hostess, a young woman with an apologetic look on her face, immediately stopped him before he could say a word. "I'm terribly sorry, sir, but we can't serve you today," she said softly, but her voice trembled just enough for him to catch it. Elon's brows furrowed. "Excuse me?" The woman shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught in an awkward position. "I know who you are, Mr. Musk, but I'm afraid I can't let you in today." The tension in the air was palpable. The other diners, still seated at their tables, were trying to listen without drawing attention to themselves. Elon took a step back, his expression unreadable. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a misunderstanding. He had been denied service, and the reason was nowhere in sight. "You must be mistaken," Elon said, maintaining his composure despite the oddity of the situation. "I've been here before, plenty of times." The hostess looked away, almost as though avoiding eye contact. "I'm sorry, sir. It's just I've been instructed not to let you in today." Elon was no stranger to controversy, but this was something entirely different. He had been refused entry at high-end restaurants before, usually for personal reasons or political statements that made some uncomfortable. But this was a top-tier restaurant in the heart of New York. This wasn't a casual bistro. This was the kind of place where power, wealth, and influence were discussed over champagne, not rejected with a simple, cold statement. Elon, however, wasn't one to be easily discouraged. He turned toward the other patrons, who were now watching the exchange unfold in disbelief. Some were whispering, others taking photos with their phones. As the tension in the air built, a few of them began murmuring under their breath. "Is that Elon Musk?" one voice hissed. Another person added, "What's going on? Why are they turning him away? Did he do something wrong?" Another whispered, unsure of what was happening. Elon knew his reputation often preceded him, but this felt different. The eyes of the world were on him, and what happened next would either be something he'd laugh off as an absurd misunderstanding or something that would turn into a media frenzy. The question now was, how would he handle this? "Could I speak to the manager?" Elon asked, his voice steady, but a flicker of confusion lingered in his eyes. The hostess hesitated, and for a moment, Elon thought she might refuse him once more. Finally, she nodded and picked up the phone to call the manager. The wait felt like an eternity. The room remained silent, and the world outside seemed to freeze in place. A couple of minutes later, a middle-aged man in a suit appeared at the front. "I'm the manager," he said, his voice calm, but there was an unmistakable air of tension surrounding him. "I'm afraid I have to ask you to leave, Mr. Musk." Elon stood there, stunned for a brief moment. The absurdity of the situation was growing. He had eaten at some of the most exclusive restaurants in the world, dealt with powerful people, and yet here he was, being kicked out of a New York establishment without explanation. "I don't understand. Why am I being asked to leave?" Elon asked, trying to keep his voice even. The manager shifted uncomfortably. "It's not personal, sir. I can't let you in today." There it was again. That vague, unsatisfactory answer that left more questions than answers. Elon wasn't about to let this slide without getting to the bottom of it. This was more than just about him being refused a table, it was a statement, one that demanded an explanation. Is this because of my opinions? Elon asked, trying to gauge where the hostility was coming from. His political stances and the controversial statements he'd made in the past weren't exactly a secret, but they had never been an issue at his favorite restaurants before. Why now? The manager looked down, clearly uncomfortable. I'm not at liberty to say, Mr. Musk. Elon's eyes narrowed, and the realization started to sink in. This wasn't about a simple misunderstanding. This was personal. Someone had made a decision about him, and it was clear that the staff was being pressured to follow it, whether they liked it or not. The silence in the room grew thicker. Patrons were now turning their attention to Elon, some whispering among themselves, others recording the interaction. It wasn't just a rejection, it was the beginning of a spectacle. Elon took a deep breath. The usual Elon Musk might have walked away, seething with frustration. The usual Elon Musk might have used his platform to lash out on social media. But today, he felt something different stirring within him. A spark of defiance. He wasn't about to let this moment define him, not in the way the world expected. You know what? Elon said, his tone shifting from confusion to determination. You've made your decision. But I'm not leaving. I'll figure this out on my own. And mark my words, you haven't heard the last of this. With those words, Elon Musk turned and walked out of the restaurant, his mind already racing with ideas about how to handle this injustice. But little did he know, this event would spark an unexpected journey that would not only change his perspective on life but also send shockwaves through the world. As the door swung closed behind him, the murmurs in the restaurant reached a crescendo. The world was about to find out just what Elon Musk was capable of when he was pushed to the limit. And this story? It had only just begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk was no stranger to controversy. Over the years, he had built a reputation that oscillated between genius and eccentricity, between tech mogul and cultural icon. His name had become synonymous with innovation, ambition, and a relentless pursuit of progress. He had revolutionized electric vehicles with Tesla, made space travel accessible with SpaceX, and sparked debates on everything from artificial intelligence to Mars colonization. But even for someone as accustomed to public scrutiny as Elon, the events of the previous night had shaken him. As he sat in his penthouse suite that morning, overlooking the bustling streets of Manhattan, he found himself lost in thought. His mind wandered, as it often did, to the early days, before the fame, the fortune, the billions. Before all of it. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon had always been an outlier. A curious child, fascinated by science fiction, computers, and the endless possibilities of technology. His parents, Errol and May Musk, were supportive, but the road ahead for young Elon was anything but easy. Growing up, he was often described as different by those who knew him. Quiet, reserved, and fiercely intelligent, he spent most of his time reading books and tinkering with gadgets. His childhood wasn't exactly a fairy tale. His relationship with his father was strained, marked by differences in ambition and worldview. Errol Musk, a successful electromechanical engineer, had his own dreams and ideas for his son. But Elon's vision was always grander, always more futuristic. His mother, May, on the other hand, was a model and dietitian who encouraged his curiosity and creativity. She was the nurturing force that allowed Elon to pursue his dreams, even when those dreams seemed impossible. Elon had always believed that the future could be shaped, that the impossible could become possible. After moving to Canada and then to the United States, Elon attended Queen's University in Ontario before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania. It was at Penn where he laid the groundwork for what would become his legacy, starting multiple ventures and diving headfirst into the world of technology and business. In the years that followed, Elon's journey was nothing short of meteoric. He co-founded Zip2, a software company that helped newspapers create online city guides. Then came X.com, which eventually became PayPal, revolutionizing the way the world handled online payments. With each success, Elon's profile grew, but so did his notoriety. By the time he founded Tesla and SpaceX, Elon was a polarizing figure. He had his fair share of critics, people who questioned his decisions, doubted his ideas, and even dismissed him as a dreamer. But Elon thrived on this skepticism. It was fuel for his fire. The more people told him he couldn't do something, the more determined he became to prove them wrong. And prove them wrong, he did. Tesla's electric cars shattered expectations. SpaceX made history by successfully launching reusable rockets. His ventures into solar energy, artificial intelligence, and brain-computer interfaces pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. He became a household name, a symbol of what it meant to think beyond the present and into the future. But with that fame came scrutiny, and sometimes ridicule. It wasn't just about the work anymore. Elon had become the subject of constant public debate. His tweets could send stock prices soaring or crashing, his offhand comments sparked endless controversies. The media couldn't get enough of him, and neither could the public. Some loved him for his unfiltered honesty, while others loathed him for the very same reason. But what many didn't realize was that beneath the surface of the billionaire entrepreneur, there was a man who had faced immense personal struggles, both private and public. He had been married 3 times, had 6 children, and experienced heartbreak that few could understand. The pressures of being a public figure took a toll on his personal life, and his relationships often became as scrutinized as his business decisions. Yet, Elon remained undeterred. His focus was always on the bigger picture, on the work that mattered, the missions that would change humanity's future. It was during one of these personal challenges that he met someone who would become a pivotal figure in his life. Grimes, the Canadian musician, had crossed paths with him at an event. Their relationship, though unconventional and often the subject of public gossip, brought Elon a sense of balance he hadn't known before. It was a grounding force in a world that often felt chaotic. But it wasn't just his personal life that was under constant pressure. The weight of running some of the world's most innovative companies was relentless. Tesla's financial struggles, SpaceX's ambitious goals, and his various ventures kept him on edge. He was always chasing the next big breakthrough, always pushing forward. There was no time for slowing down. So, when Elon found himself sitting in his penthouse, reflecting on the incident at the restaurant, he couldn't help but think about how much had changed in his life. This wasn't just about being turned away at a fancy New York eatery. It was a symbol of the larger forces at play, the tension between innovation and tradition, between those who dared to think differently and those who clung to the status quo. Elon had become a lightning rod for criticism, but he had also become a symbol of hope for others. He was the embodiment of the American dream, a self-made billionaire who had gone from a boy in South Africa with nothing but a dream to a man who was changing the world. But as much as he had achieved, he couldn't escape the fact that there were still people who wanted to see him fail. There were still those who didn't understand his vision, who didn't want to see the future he was working towards. The incident at the restaurant was a reminder of that. But it was also a challenge. A challenge he wasn't willing to back down from. Elon Musk wasn't the type to accept defeat, especially not when it came to something as trivial as a denied dinner reservation. He stood up from his chair, walked over to the large glass window, and gazed out at the city. The sun was just beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the skyline. For a moment, he allowed himself to just breathe. But then, the thought hit him. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The beginning of something much bigger. And he wasn't about to let anyone, especially not a fancy restaurant in New York, tell him how his story would end. The morning after the restaurant incident, Elon Musk was in his usual state, hyper-focused, determined, and just a little bit restless. He spent the early hours pacing through his penthouse, his mind already racing with ideas and possibilities. The controversy wasn't something he could easily dismiss, and it certainly wasn't something he planned to leave unresolved. As much as he'd been rejected from the restaurant, there was a feeling gnawing at him. This was about more than just dinner. It was a symbol of something deeper, something that could turn into an even bigger issue, one that could affect his businesses, his reputation, and the future he was working so hard to build. That afternoon, as Elon sat in his home office with his laptop open in front of him, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. He scanned through his emails. There was always something urgent to deal with, some new crisis to address. SpaceX had just secured a new contract with NASA, which was exciting, but there were still numerous logistical and financial hurdles to navigate. Tesla was on the verge of launching their next big model, but production challenges loomed large. Then there were the constant calls from investors, demanding updates, wanting assurance that everything was on track. Elon paused for a moment, leaning back in his chair and staring out the window. It was hard to keep it all together. The weight of being the face of several cutting-edge companies could feel suffocating at times. And then, the restaurant incident crept back into his mind. Why had they turned him away? Was it because of his outspoken political views? Was it his social media presence? Or was there something more personal behind it? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. "Come in," Elon called, his voice hoarse from a night of little sleep. It was Gwen Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, who had arrived earlier than usual. She was always punctual, a sharp contrast to Elon's more erratic schedule. She was holding a tablet in one hand, a concerned look on her face. "Elon, we need to talk about yesterday," she said, sitting down at the desk across from him. He looked up at her, not needing any explanation. "I know," he replied, running a hand through his hair. "I don't get it. Why did they turn me away? I've been to that restaurant 100 times. This time, something felt different." Gwen studied him for a moment. "I don't know. But it's already all over social media. People are talking about it. Some are calling it a stunt. Others are saying it's a statement about you, your views, your influence." Elon sighed, standing up to pace around the room. "I don't know what to think. I've been ruffling feathers for years, Gwen, but this feels like something else. It's like, they're trying to make a point. And I don't think it's just about me being Elon Musk. It's about something bigger." She raised an eyebrow, her voice measured. "What do you mean?" Elon stopped pacing, turning to face her. "I think they're trying to make me a scapegoat for everything they don't like about the future. The way I push boundaries, the way I challenge the status quo. I've always been a disruptor. But what if this isn't just about me? What if it's about something deeper, about the future itself?" Gwen was quiet for a moment, clearly processing what Elon was saying. Then she nodded slowly. "You've made a lot of enemies, Elon. People who don't agree with your methods, with your vision. And some of those people are powerful. The restaurant, the media, it's not just about you anymore. It's a larger ideological battle. They see your success as a threat to everything they've built." Elon felt a chill run down his spine. He had always known that there were those who didn't share his vision for the future, those who were content with the world as it was. But the idea that there were powerful forces actively working against him, against his companies, his goals, was something he hadn't fully considered. "I've spent so much time focused on what I can build, Gwen, that I never stopped to think about how many people are actively trying to stop me," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "But now, I can't ignore it anymore. They've made it clear they want to shut me down. This is about more than just a dinner. It's about my ideas, my work, and what I represent." Gwen's eyes narrowed in thought. "So what's your next move? What are you going to do about this?" Elon walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline once again. For a moment, he was lost in the vastness of the world before him, the possibilities, and the challenges that lay ahead. I'm going to make sure they know exactly who I am. What I stand for. I'm not backing down from this. I've been in tough spots before, and I'm not about to let a restaurant or anyone else dictate my future. He turned back to face her, determination flooding his veins. This isn't just about a personal affront. This is about defending the future I'm building. The future we're all building. And if I have to take this fight public, I will. Gwen stood up, nodding. I think you're right. This is bigger than just a personal issue. And you know, Elon, you've always said that adversity breeds innovation. Maybe this is the spark you need. Elon smirked, the familiar fire reigniting inside him. If they think this is going to stop me, they're in for a surprise. I'll show them what happens when you try to block progress. The days following the incident were filled with both external and internal tension. Elon began to strategize. He knew that his public image would be crucial in the coming weeks, and he needed to control the narrative before anyone else could spin it for him. The media, as always, was quick to latch onto the story, turning it into a spectacle. Social media exploded with opinions, memes, and debates. Elon had become the focal point of a much larger cultural conversation, one that was about more than just one rejection at a restaurant. His PR team advised him to keep quiet, to let the story die down. But Elon wasn't the type to let a narrative fizzle out without making his point. He knew that this was his moment to make a bold statement, to show the world that he wasn't someone who could be silenced or pushed into the background. And so, he did what he did best, he took control of the conversation. Elon Musk had always been a man accustomed to media attention. It came with the territory, his companies, his ideas, his very existence in the public eye often felt like a double-edged sword. The media loved to either praise him as a visionary or tear him down as an arrogant billionaire with unrealistic dreams. But what had happened over the past few days felt different. The incident at the restaurant had ignited something far beyond just a news headline. It had sparked a media firestorm, one that wasn't going to burn out quickly. As Elon sat at his desk, staring at his phone, the relentless flow of notifications kept interrupting his train of thought. Twitter was blowing up with mentions, and news outlets had already spun multiple versions of what had happened. Some painted him as a victim of elitism, while others painted him as a narcissistic tech mogul who believed he was entitled to everything. No matter the spin, one thing was clear, this wasn't going away anytime soon. His PR team had suggested a statement, something neutral and calculated. Stay calm, wait for the media to move on, they said. But Elon had never been one for neutrality. Neutrality was the enemy of innovation, of disruption. And in this case, neutrality would only make him seem weak, as if he were hiding something. No, he was going to take control. This was his story now, and he would dictate how it was told. He tapped out a tweet, something short, provocative, and very Elon Musk. Dinner denied at a restaurant? Guess I'm going to have to build my own place. Stay tuned. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The tweet immediately sent shockwaves through social media. People were confused, amused, and curious. Was this a joke? Was he really going to build a restaurant? Or was he simply mocking the very idea of elitism that had caused the incident in the first place? Elon didn't give an explanation. He didn't need to. The ambiguity was part of the allure. As the tweet spread like wildfire, news outlets started to pick it up. Interviews with restaurant staff, experts on the culture of high-end dining, and even social media influencers began to weigh in. Everyone had an opinion on what Elon Musk's tweet meant and what it signified about his character. It was an opportunity for the media to discuss larger issues, elitism, access, and the role of billionaires in society. But Elon wasn't about to let them dictate the terms of the debate. He sat back in his chair, watching as the media frenzy unfolded. For a moment, it felt almost surreal. The power he wielded, the sheer influence his words had. He was used to being a headline, but this time it felt different. It was as though the entire world was waiting for him to make the next move, to offer some kind of response that would either solidify his place as a misunderstood genius or cement his reputation as a man out of touch with reality. The phone rang, pulling him back to the present. It was Gwyneth Paltrow, a longtime friend and a fellow entrepreneur. She was one of the few people in his circle who didn't just see him as a brand or a walking headline. Gwyneth had always been honest with him, even when her opinions were difficult to hear. "Elon, you need to stop this. It's getting out of hand," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You know what the media does. They're twisting everything. They want you to fight back. They want you to get dragged into the mud." He could hear the concern in her voice, but he wasn't backing down. "Gwyneth, they've already done that. It's out of my control. But what I can do is make sure they know exactly who I am. And I'm not going to let anyone define me by a single incident at a restaurant." She paused, perhaps considering his words. "I get it. But you're playing a dangerous game here. You're creating a spectacle. If you're not careful, you'll lose sight of what really matters: your work, your companies, the people who rely on you." Elon appreciated her concern, but he wasn't about to let the media dictate his choices. "You're right, Gwyneth, but this isn't just about a spectacle. It's about something deeper. I'm tired of being the punching bag for people who want to tear down everything I'm working towards. I'm going to use this moment to show them who I really am. I'm not going to back down. Ever." She sighed. "Just don't forget why you started doing all this in the first place. Stay focused." The conversation ended, and Elon returned to his phone. The tweet had sparked more attention than he'd expected, and now the world was watching. But what came next would be the real test. Over the next few days, Elon remained at the center of the media storm. His tweet about building his own restaurant became the subject of endless debates. Some people believed it was just a jab at the elitist culture that had snubbed him, while others saw it as yet another eccentric idea from a man who was out of touch with reality. But there were those who took him seriously. They saw the tweet as a symbol of something bigger, something revolutionary. After all, Elon Musk had a history of taking the impossible and making it possible. But the media wasn't done with him yet. They needed more. They needed an interview, a response from the man himself. And when Elon's PR team suggested that he sit down for a live interview to clear the air, he reluctantly agreed. If the world wanted to hear from him, he was going to make sure they got the full story. The day of the interview, Elon stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his suit and checking his appearance. The nerves were there, but they were fleeting. He had dealt with far more intense situations in the past. This was just another challenge, a challenge he would rise to, as always. The camera crew set up in his office, lights positioned just right, the stage ready for what would undoubtedly be a high-stakes moment. As Elon took his seat in front of the interviewer, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The interviewer, a seasoned journalist known for her direct questions, wasted no time. "So, Elon, let's get straight to it. You've been turning heads with your recent tweet about building your own restaurant. What's going on? Is this a joke, or do you really plan to take on the culinary world?" Elon's expression remained calm, his eyes focused. "It's not a joke. I'm not one to shy away from challenges, and if I'm being honest, the idea of creating something new, something that breaks away from tradition, is exactly what I do. Whether it's a car, a rocket, or, yes, a restaurant. Why not?" The interviewer raised an eyebrow. "But isn't this just a way to grab attention? To play into your image as a disruptor?" Elon leaned forward, his voice unwavering. "If you think building a successful restaurant or changing an industry like dining is about attention, then you don't understand what it means to challenge the status quo. I'm not doing this to grab attention. I'm doing it because it's what I've always done. I take the impossible and make it real. If people want to criticize me for it, then that's fine. But in the end, it's about progress. And that's something I've dedicated my life to. The interviewer pressed on, trying to dig deeper. You've always been a controversial figure, Elon. But do you think that maybe, just maybe, you're pushing people away with your brashness, your arrogance? Elon's eyes flickered, but his tone remained steady. Sometimes you have to be brash to get things done. Sometimes you have to challenge people, push them beyond their comfort zones. If I'm perceived as arrogant for wanting to change the world, then so be it. But I don't think that's the real issue. The real issue is that people are scared of change. They don't like the fact that I'm not afraid to fail. I've built my companies from the ground up, and I've made mistakes along the way. But I've never backed down from a challenge. The interview continued, but Elon knew the questions would keep coming. The media was hungry for drama, for conflict, for anything that could keep the story alive. But what they didn't understand was that Elon wasn't playing by their rules. He wasn't here to pander to the narrative they wanted to create. He was here to shape his own story. And with that, the storm continued to build, but Elon Musk was no longer simply a passive figure in the media. He was an active force, ready to face whatever came next. The storm Elon Musk had created was far from over. In fact, the whirlwind of controversy surrounding the restaurant incident was just the beginning of something much bigger. While the media continued to dissect his every word, scrutinizing his every tweet and public statement, Elon had already begun to formulate a plan that would shift the narrative entirely. If they wanted drama, he was going to give them something they couldn't ignore. By the end of the week, it was clear that the restaurant rejection wasn't just a passing headline. It had become a symbol, a metaphor for the larger battles he had been fighting quietly for years. And Elon, always one to turn adversity into opportunity, saw this moment as the perfect chance to make a statement, not just to the media, but to the world. He had been thinking about it for days. If the restaurant could reject him, then perhaps there were other institutions and systems out there that needed disrupting. He had always believed that the traditional way of doing things was outdated, and this was no different. So, he decided that if the elites wouldn't welcome him, he would take a different route. Elon's bold plan was clear: he would build a new kind of establishment, one that defied the very norms of exclusivity and arrogance that had made his rejection so public. The idea was simple: create a restaurant that was open to everyone, regardless of status, wealth, or connections. A place that would not just serve food, but provide an experience, a community that didn't just cater to the privileged, but to the people who were often left out of the conversation. He had the means, the resources, and the platform to make it happen. After all, building businesses from the ground up was his specialty. And a restaurant? That was nothing compared to the monumental projects he had already tackled. SpaceX, Tesla, and The Boring Company were proof that if he set his mind to something, nothing was impossible. The announcement came quickly. Elon Musk, in his usual fashion, didn't waste time with subtlety. The tweet came first, a mere sentence that set the tone for what was to come. I'm building a restaurant. Not just any restaurant. A place where innovation meets inclusivity. The doors will always be open. It was a clear shot across the bow to those who had rejected him. But it was also a message to anyone who had ever felt left out of the world of exclusivity, privilege, and power. Elon was offering them a seat at the table. Literally. Immediately, the media jumped on it. The headlines went crazy. Some of them called it a publicity stunt, while others questioned whether Elon Musk was truly serious. Could he actually pull this off? Was this just another outlandish idea from a billionaire who was known for his unpredictable ventures? The world had to wait to find out. Behind the scenes, Elon was already assembling a team to bring his vision to life. He wasn't about to leave this to chance, not when it was a direct challenge to everything that had just transpired. He wanted the restaurant to be a beacon of innovation, a place where technology and culinary artistry could meet in unexpected ways. He envisioned something far beyond the traditional dining experience, an environment where guests could not only enjoy great food but also engage with groundbreaking tech. Gwen Shotwell, his trusted president of SpaceX, had raised an eyebrow when he first mentioned the idea. "A restaurant, Elon? Are you sure about this? It feels like, well, it feels like something out of left field." Elon smiled. "Exactly. Left field is where the best ideas come from. We're going to create a space that challenges every preconceived notion about what a dining experience can be. We'll use technology to improve everything from the way food is grown to the way it's served. It's about more than just feeding people. It's about creating a new way of thinking." Gwen paused, clearly intrigued. "And you think the public is ready for this?" Elon's eyes gleamed with that familiar spark of determination. "They have to be. This isn't about catering to the elite or the wealthy. This is about creating a place for everyone. A place where everyone has access to the future. And if they don't like it, well, I guess they'll just have to stay away." It was a bold plan, but Elon had never been one to shy away from the big challenges. He set to work immediately, pulling in experts from every corner of his vast network. From the best chefs to innovative tech engineers, from designers to artificial intelligence specialists, he gathered a dream team, one that could bring his vision to life. As the weeks went by, the project gained momentum. Elon's vision for the restaurant was taking shape, but there was more to it than just a unique dining experience. It was about creating something that represented the ideals he had spent years pushing: technology, progress, and inclusion. The restaurant would feature AI-powered kitchens, robots that could cook and serve food, and a system that would allow diners to control certain aspects of their experience using augmented reality. The space itself would be designed to reflect the future, with sleek, futuristic designs and immersive experiences that were far from the conventional restaurant atmosphere. But the biggest surprise came when Elon decided that the restaurant would be entirely self-sustaining. Everything, from the energy to the food, would be generated in a way that minimized environmental impact. The restaurant would use vertical farming to grow fresh produce on-site, and all waste would be recycled into new products, making the establishment completely sustainable. The day Elon officially unveiled the plans for the restaurant, the world was watching. The media had no idea what to expect, but they knew one thing for sure: this wasn't going to be just another restaurant. This was going to be something that changed everything. As the launch event approached, the anticipation was palpable. Elon Musk, the man who had revolutionized space travel, electric cars, and transportation, was now turning his attention to the restaurant industry. The world waited to see what would happen next. Elon wasn't just aiming to create a new business, he was trying to redefine what it meant to dine, to live in the modern world. It wasn't about the food. It was about the experience. It was about creating a place where anyone, no matter their status, could walk through the door and feel like they belonged. This wasn't just a fight against the elitism that had rejected him, it was a bold declaration that the future was for everyone. The day of the launch event arrived. The anticipation had been building for weeks, with news outlets, influencers, and tech enthusiasts all speculating about what Elon Musk had in store. The idea of a restaurant that embraced technology, inclusivity, and sustainability was revolutionary, but people were still unsure of what exactly that would look like in practice. Would it live up to the hype, or would it be just another one of Elon's eccentric ventures? The world was about to find out. Elon stood in front of the sleek, futuristic building that housed his new creation. It was more than just a restaurant, it was a symbol. A symbol of everything he stood for: innovation, disruption, and the breaking down of societal barriers. As he adjusted his tie and glanced around at the press crew setting up, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about food, it was about proving a point. A point that he had been making for years, that the future belonged to those who dared to challenge the status quo. Inside, the venue was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The walls were lined with interactive screens, showcasing the restaurant's commitment to sustainability, technology, and innovation. The floor was made of a material that adjusted its color and texture based on the mood of the diners. Every corner of the space was designed to feel like a living, breathing extension of the future, a place where people could experience not just great food, but a glimpse of what the world could be if technology was used to its full potential. The media was buzzing. They had been given a brief tour before the event officially began, but now it was time for the grand reveal. The cameras were focused on Elon as he stepped up to the stage, flanked by some of his closest allies, chefs, engineers, and sustainability experts, all ready to showcase what they had worked so hard to create. Elon took the microphone, and the room fell silent. The tension was palpable. The world was watching. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady, yet charged with the kind of energy that only Elon Musk could muster. "This is not just a restaurant. This is the future of dining. This is a place where innovation meets inclusivity, where technology doesn't just support our way of life, it enhances it." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. People were captivated, hanging on his every word. They had expected a speech, but this wasn't just any speech. This was Elon Musk presenting a vision for a better future, one plate at a time. "We've built something that challenges every preconceived notion about dining. This isn't about serving overpriced meals to the elite. This is about creating an experience that anyone can enjoy, no matter who they are, where they come from, or what they can afford." He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. There was no turning back now. This was his moment to prove that he could make a real impact, not just in tech, but in society as a whole. "We're using cutting-edge technology to not only make the dining experience better but to change the way we think about food. From vertical farming to AI-powered kitchens, we're not just serving meals, we're rethinking the entire food system." As Elon spoke, the audience began to see the full scope of what he was presenting. The screens behind him flickered to life, showing footage of the restaurant's AI-driven kitchen in action. Robots seamlessly prepared dishes, while a virtual assistant guided customers through the menu, offering suggestions based on their tastes and dietary preferences. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. But the most striking feature was the sustainability aspect. A live feed from the vertical farms outside the building showed how food was being grown in real time, with the restaurant's technology ensuring that every ingredient was fresh, locally sourced, and produced with minimal waste. "We're not just changing how we eat," Elon continued. "We're changing the way we live. This restaurant is a living example of what happens when technology, sustainability, and inclusivity come together. And we're just getting started." The crowd erupted into applause. This was exactly what they had been waiting for, something bold, something that didn't just promise change but delivered it. Elon Musk had once again proven that his ideas were not just fantasies, they were the future. Later that evening, the first guests were invited to experience the restaurant for themselves. The dining area was filled with a diverse group of people, young professionals, families, tech enthusiasts, and even some skeptics who had come just to see if Elon Musk's grand vision would live up to the hype. The atmosphere was electric, charged with excitement and curiosity. As the first course was served, diners marveled at the presentation. The dishes were not just food, they were works of art. Each one was prepared with the utmost precision by the robots in the AI-powered kitchen, and the flavors were unlike anything anyone had tasted before. The experience was seamless, with every guest feeling as though they were part of something larger than themselves. Elon sat at one of the tables, quietly observing. He wasn't here to bask in the glory of the launch, he was here to see if the vision he had worked so hard to create was truly resonating with the people. From where he sat, it looked like it was. He watched as a family of 4 sat down to enjoy their meal. The father, a middle-aged man with a graying beard, looked over at Elon and gave him a nod of approval. "This is incredible," the man said. "My kids are loving it. It's like they're interacting with the food, not just eating it. This is the future." Elon smiled, but he didn't get comfortable. There was still so much to be done. this was just the beginning. He knew that the road ahead would be full of challenges, especially now that his critics would be watching even more closely. But in this moment, surrounded by people who were experiencing the future of dining firsthand, he felt a sense of pride, a sense of purpose that reminded him why he had started all of this in the first place. As the night wore on, Elon walked through the restaurant, stopping to chat with guests, share a laugh with staff, and even make a few minor adjustments to the technology. He wasn't just the founder, he was an active participant in the experience, ensuring that every detail was perfect. It was a success, beyond anyone's expectations. But as Elon Musk had learned time and time again, success was fleeting. There would always be the next challenge, the next hurdle to overcome. But for now, he allowed himself a moment to savor what he had achieved. He had done what no one thought possible. He had disrupted the restaurant industry, and in doing so, had sent a message to the world: the future was now. The restaurant's grand opening quickly became one of the most talked about events of the year. Social media buzzed with excitement, opinions, and mixed reactions. Some hailed it as a new era in dining, a model for how technology could revolutionize not just industries, but societal norms. Others, of course, had their reservations. In the days following the launch, headlines flooded across platforms. "Elon Musk shakes up the restaurant industry," read one prominent article. "A restaurant for the people, Musk's bold vision comes to life," proclaimed another. But not all the press was positive. The mainstream media, ever skeptical of Musk's ventures, had their own take. "The billionaire's playground," one critical article headlined. "Is Elon Musk's new restaurant really for the people or just another marketing gimmick?" Elon had long been familiar with media scrutiny, but this time it felt different. There was a shift. For the first time, the general public had witnessed a direct challenge to the elitism that dominated so many facets of modern life, and it wasn't clear whether they were fully ready to accept it. The restaurant was a mirror reflecting a society still divided. Some saw the inclusivity and the boldness of it all, while others questioned whether the real innovation was just a PR stunt. Even within the tech community, reactions were split. Some saw it as yet another masterpiece of Musk's imagination. The idea of an entirely self-sustaining restaurant, powered by AI and vertical farming, was undeniably innovative. For Elon, it was a triumph, a powerful demonstration of his ability to merge the future with the present. The fact that the restaurant was built on principles of sustainability and inclusion made it even more groundbreaking in the eyes of many of his supporters. However, not everyone in Silicon Valley shared his enthusiasm. A few prominent tech entrepreneurs, notably those from companies like Google and Amazon, seemed to brush off Elon's move as unnecessary. They viewed it as an indulgence, a showcase for Musk's ego rather than a practical solution for the masses. Still, as the days went by, their criticisms didn't seem to matter. People were already flocking to the restaurant, eager to experience what was being billed as the future of dining. It wasn't long before the first wave of influencers began sharing their experiences online. Influencer reviews flooded social media, with hashtags like #MuskRestaurant and #DiningWithTech trending. The reaction was a mix of awe and skepticism. Some were utterly captivated by the technological aspects, how the robot servers moved with seamless precision, how the augmented reality elements turned a simple dinner into an interactive adventure. Others, however, questioned whether the technology was too much. Would it take away from the human element of dining? In the heart of the restaurant, the AI-powered kitchen became one of the biggest talking points. Automated systems were programmed to learn from customer preferences, adapting menus and cooking techniques in real time. It was a far cry from the traditional cooking experience. No human chefs were present in the kitchen, yet the food was as precise as it was imaginative. From delicately plated dishes to personalized nutrition plans, everything was tailored to fit the diner's individual tastes. Elon had expected these mixed reactions. He knew that not everyone would be on board with his vision, especially when it came to such a deeply ingrained tradition as food. Dining had always been about community and connection. How would people respond when it was essentially run by machines? But there was something else driving Elon, something bigger than the criticisms and the media frenzy. The restaurant had quickly become a symbol of the power of innovation. It was more than just a new way of eating, it was a tangible representation of what the future could look like when technology, sustainability, and inclusivity came together. Inside the restaurant, despite the praise, the staff felt the weight of the expectations. Elon had made it clear that he didn't just want the technology to impress, he wanted it to serve a greater purpose. The experience wasn't about just making food, it was about connecting people to something larger than themselves. And the restaurant's success, or failure, rested on the shoulders of the team he had put together. At the center of it all was Ava, the restaurant's head of operations, who had been working with Elon from the very beginning. A former SpaceX engineer, Ava was known for her sharp mind and her ability to make the impossible happen. She had quickly earned Elon's trust, and now she found herself at the forefront of a different kind of challenge. Ava had spent countless hours in the restaurant, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. From overseeing the AI systems to making sure the dining experience was seamless, she had poured her heart and soul into this project. But the feedback from customers and critics alike made her realize that this was only the beginning. This is only the first step, she would remind her team. We've shown that it's possible to disrupt the industry. But now we need to continue pushing the boundaries. We can't let this be a one-off. Ava's words were true, this was just the beginning. While the restaurant was already drawing crowds and generating buzz, there was much more to be done. Elon's ultimate vision for the restaurant was not only to change how people experienced food but also to demonstrate that innovation could solve some of the world's most pressing issues, from hunger to climate change. And Ava, ever the perfectionist, was determined to make sure that vision became a reality. As the media frenzy continued, Elon found himself back in the spotlight. His critics were relentless, but his supporters were louder. Everywhere he went, people talked about the restaurant, about the possibilities it represented. And no one seemed to notice the lingering question that had started to echo in the back of his mind. What's next? While the restaurant was clearly a hit, Elon couldn't help but think ahead to his next challenge. He had built a restaurant for the people, but he wasn't just focused on creating the next dining sensation. He was thinking bigger, way bigger. He wanted to change the very systems of society. What if food could be distributed through technology in ways that reached even the most remote corners of the world? What if the AI-driven kitchen concept could be expanded to feed millions? What if a restaurant could become more than just a place to eat, but a symbol of a new way of living, working, and connecting? As Elon sat in his office, scanning through the day's reports, he was already beginning to formulate a plan. A plan that would take the lessons learned from the restaurant and apply them to other industries, healthcare, education, transportation, and more. Elon Musk had always believed in the power of technology to change the world. But now, he was more determined than ever to prove that innovation could solve the problems humanity had struggled with for centuries. As the weeks passed, Elon's restaurant became a fixture in the cultural landscape. People from all over the world flocked to experience the revolutionary dining concept. The buzz around the place continued to grow, and the media coverage was relentless, some in awe, some critical, but all talking about it. And yet, in the midst of all the praise and success, a quiet storm was brewing just below the surface. Elon knew better than anyone that success brought with it not just accolades, but pressure. As the spotlight on his restaurant grew, so did expectations. The world was watching, waiting for the next big move, the next groundbreaking innovation. They wanted more. And Elon was already thinking about how he could exceed their expectations. In private meetings with his closest advisors and key team members, he began discussing ways to expand the model, take it beyond the walls of the restaurant, to reach every corner of the globe. He had always seen himself as a pioneer, someone who could tackle seemingly impossible challenges and create solutions where others saw only obstacles. The concept of a sustainable, tech-driven dining experience was only the beginning. Elon wasn't just interested in building more restaurants, he wanted to use the same technology to address some of the world's most pressing issues. Hunger, climate change, poverty, inequality. All of these issues were interconnected, and Elon believed that through innovation, they could be solved. "Think about it," Elon said in one of the meetings, his voice filled with excitement. "We have the technology. We have the AI. We have the infrastructure. Why not take this model to places that don't have access to fresh food? Why not use our systems to create automated food production that can serve people anywhere?" His team was listening, their eyes wide with the possibilities. Elon was known for thinking big, but this was something different. This wasn't just about building the next big tech product or achieving market dominance. This was about creating a movement, about changing the world for the better. The idea was audacious. The logistics of feeding people in remote, underserved areas using AI-driven kitchens and vertical farming were complicated, to say the least. But for Elon, complexity was never an obstacle, it was an invitation to innovate. And yet, not everyone on his team was convinced. Ava, his trusted head of operations, was one of the few who expressed caution. As much as she admired Elon's vision, she knew the challenges would be immense. She had already seen the difficulties of running a single restaurant with the level of technology and complexity Elon wanted. Scaling that model globally, especially in regions where infrastructure was lacking, would require more than just good intentions. It would require an entirely new approach to logistics, supply chains, and local partnerships. "Elon," she said during one of their meetings, "I get where you're coming from, but this isn't just about the tech. This is about getting people to trust it, and that's going to take time. The world isn't going to change overnight, and we need to make sure we're ready for the obstacles we'll face." Elon looked at her thoughtfully. Ava was right. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, and there would be plenty of hurdles to overcome. But he wasn't one to shy away from challenges. "I understand, Ava," he said. "But we're at a tipping point. The restaurant isn't just a success, it's a symbol of what's possible. If we don't push forward, someone else will. And that someone might not have the same vision of making the world a better place." Ava nodded, understanding his point but still wary of how fast things were moving. "I'm with you. But we need to make sure we're building the right foundation first. The technology has to work flawlessly, the supply chains have to be in place, and we need to establish a global network that can support this." As they continued to discuss the next steps, Elon's mind raced ahead. The restaurant had proven that people were hungry for innovation, for a new kind of experience. But could they create an entire ecosystem that would scale across the globe? While Elon and his team were busy planning the future, the world continued to respond to his restaurant in unexpected ways. The social media landscape had exploded with opinions, many positive, some skeptical, and a few downright dismissive. But the one thing that stood out the most was the growing trend of people questioning the relationship between technology and humanity. For some, the restaurant's AI-driven experience felt like a glimpse into the future, a future where humans could finally break free from the mundane, repetitive tasks and allow machines to do what they did best. But for others, it was a reminder of how technology could distance us from each other. They saw the sleek, robotically efficient environment as sterile, too impersonal, a sign that society was heading in the wrong direction. The debate about the role of technology in everyday life was now at a fever pitch. Elon, as always, found himself in the middle of it. On one side, he had the advocates, those who believed that technology, properly used, could solve the world's biggest problems. On the other side were the critics, those who feared that technology would strip away the humanity that made life meaningful. And yet, Elon believed the answer lay somewhere in between. He had never been about removing people from the equation, he had always been about giving people the tools to live better, more connected lives. For him, the restaurant was just the beginning. It was about creating a new framework, a new way of thinking about how society could function. In his eyes, technology wasn't meant to replace humanity. It was meant to enhance it. The tipping point came sooner than expected. A large food insecurity crisis in a distant country made headlines. An entire region, ravaged by natural disasters, was struggling to feed its population. Relief efforts were slow, and the infrastructure was inadequate. The situation was dire, and Elon knew that this was where his vision for the restaurant could have a real impact. He pulled his team together. "We can't just sit here and wait for things to improve," Elon said. "This is our chance to make a real difference." Ava, now more aligned with Elon's urgency, began laying out a plan. They would use the restaurant's technology to design a scalable solution for the affected area. Vertical farms, powered by AI, could be rapidly deployed to provide food. The same kitchen systems could be adapted to cook nutritious meals, while drones could help deliver them to remote areas. It was an ambitious project, but it felt like the right thing to do. It wasn't just about building the next big thing, it was about changing lives in ways that mattered. And for the first time in months, Elon felt a renewed sense of purpose. The situation in the affected region became more urgent with each passing day. Elon's idea of using the technology behind his restaurant to address the food insecurity crisis was starting to take shape, but time was running out. The world was watching as resources dwindled, and the pressure mounted for a solution. Elon knew that this was his moment to prove that his vision wasn't just about revolutionizing industries, it was about saving lives. Ava and her team worked around the clock, designing the systems that would allow them to quickly deploy the necessary infrastructure. The vertical farming technology, which had been a hallmark of the restaurant, would need to be adapted to local climates and conditions. The AI-driven kitchens would have to be recalibrated for large-scale food production. And the logistical network would require a complete overhaul to ensure that food could reach the most remote areas in record time. Despite the urgency, there was an undeniable sense of excitement in the air. This was bigger than anything they had ever done before. Elon's vision had always been about challenging the status quo, but now it was about rewriting the rulebook entirely. The success of the restaurant had demonstrated the potential of blending technology with human needs. Now, they had the opportunity to apply that same principle on a global scale. In the early days of planning, Elon had been adamant about one thing: they couldn't afford to wait for permission. Governments and aid organizations were often slow to respond, bogged down by bureaucracy and red tape. If they were going to make a real impact, they needed to act fast, and they needed to do it on their own terms. "It's about disrupting more than just the restaurant business," Elon said in one of his strategy meetings. "This is about solving global problems. We've got the tech. We've got the resources. What we need now is the will to make it happen." Ava nodded. She had seen Elon in action before, but this felt different. There was a fire in his eyes that she hadn't seen in months. The stakes were higher now, and he knew it. "If we can make this work, it could change everything," she said. "Not just for the region, but for the world." Elon smiled. "Exactly. But we need to move fast. The sooner we can deploy these systems, the sooner we can get food to people who need it." As the days turned into weeks, the project gained momentum. Teams from Tesla, SpaceX, and the restaurant's parent company collaborated, pooling their resources and expertise. Elon had always been known for his ability to get the best minds in the business to work together toward a common goal, and this time was no different. The first test runs of the vertical farming systems were successful. The AI kitchens were recalibrated and ready to produce high-quality meals at scale. But the most significant challenge was logistics. How would they get the food to those in need? Traditional supply chains were no longer viable in the face of such an urgent crisis. They would have to innovate once again. Elon's solution: drones. "We're going to use autonomous drones to deliver food to the most remote areas," he explained to the team. "They'll be able to navigate through tough terrain and get food to people faster than any traditional delivery system." The idea seemed far-fetched, but it was Elon Musk, and when he proposed something unconventional, it was usually because he saw a way to make it work. The drones were equipped with high-efficiency storage compartments, allowing them to carry a significant number of meals at a time. They would be programmed to follow predefined routes, ensuring they avoided obstacles and delivered food directly to the areas where it was needed most. As the drones were tested in simulation environments, the excitement grew. The idea of using them to deliver food to regions in crisis felt like a breakthrough. For the first time, the world was looking at a solution that could make a tangible difference, not just in a single community, but on a global scale. The media began to catch wind of the project. At first, it was just a blip, an innovative approach to tackling hunger. But as more details emerged, the story began to pick up steam. News outlets around the world were reporting on the daring initiative, and Elon's name was once again trending. But this time, the coverage was different. People were beginning to see him not just as a tech mogul or a billionaire entrepreneur, but as someone who could actually change the world for the better. In a rare interview, Elon shared his thoughts with the press. "We've always been focused on pushing boundaries. But now, it's about using technology to solve problems that matter. Food insecurity, hunger, climate change, these are problems that we can solve if we stop thinking about them as problems and start thinking about them as challenges that we can overcome." The words struck a chord with people. For the first time in a long while, the world was seeing a different side of Elon Musk. He wasn't just building rockets or electric cars, he was thinking about how his innovations could directly impact the lives of everyday people. And that was a message that resonated deeply. As the deployment of the vertical farming systems and AI kitchens began in the affected region, Elon and his team watched anxiously. The first test deliveries were being made, and the drones were operating as planned. But the real test would come when the scale of the operation expanded. Could they feed an entire population? Could their technology handle the demands of a global crisis? The first deliveries were a success. People in the affected region were receiving fresh, nutritious meals, and the response was overwhelming. Social media lit up with pictures of people receiving food packages from the drones, and the stories of hope and relief began to spread. But the real challenge had only just begun. As more drones were deployed and the infrastructure grew, the questions that had plagued Elon's team began to surface. Would the technology hold up in the long term? Would the logistics scale to meet the needs of millions? Could they sustain this on a global level, or would the systems collapse under the pressure? Elon didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was certain: he wasn't going to stop until they had found a solution. The stakes were too high. The world was watching. And for once, it felt like everything was aligned: the technology, the people, the drive to make a difference. Elon had always been one to embrace the challenges that came with innovation. But as the global rollout of his food delivery project progressed, it became clear that the road ahead would not be without its hurdles. The initial successes were undeniable: people were getting fed, the drones were delivering food efficiently, and the technology was scaling at an impressive pace. But, as always, complications began to arise as the project expanded. One of the first issues that surfaced was the unpredictability of local environments. Although the drones were equipped with advanced navigation systems designed to handle tough terrain, there were still many unforeseen obstacles. Weather conditions in remote areas were far more volatile than anticipated: heavy rains, extreme winds, and even unexpected wildlife interference were causing delays in delivery times. And while the vertical farming systems worked well in controlled environments, they struggled to adapt to certain climates and ecosystems where soil conditions were poor or unpredictable. Ava was the first to raise her concerns. "We knew there would be obstacles, but these weather conditions are beyond what we planned for. The drones are slowing down in these remote areas, and the farming systems are struggling with the inconsistent local climates." Elon nodded thoughtfully, already formulating a solution. He had never been one to accept failure, especially when the stakes were so high. "We need to find ways to adapt the drones to these conditions. Maybe we need to design them with better weather resistance or give them more autonomy to navigate around these obstacles. As for the farms, we'll look into modifying the systems to be more climate resilient. Ava raised an eyebrow. It won't be that simple, Elon. These are massive systems we're talking about. It could take months to make those adjustments, and we're already behind schedule in some regions. Elon's mind was already working at full speed. We can't afford to wait months. Let's prioritize key areas where we're facing the most immediate problems and send teams to work on localized solutions. We'll need to collaborate with local experts who understand the conditions better. We can adapt faster if we work together. Elon was adamant, and his urgency fueled the team's efforts. Teams were dispatched to remote regions where the weather was wreaking havoc on the deliveries. Engineers worked tirelessly to improve drone technology, incorporating more robust weather-resistant materials and fine-tuning the systems to ensure better navigation in adverse conditions. They also modified the vertical farming systems to incorporate new agricultural techniques, such as aquaponics, that could help mitigate the challenges posed by varying climates. As the weeks went by, there were moments of doubt. The pressure was immense, and the challenges seemed insurmountable at times. But every time Elon and his team hit a roadblock, they doubled down, determined to find a way through it. Meanwhile, back in the media spotlight, the public's perception of the project was evolving. While the initial excitement over the innovative approach to food security had been overwhelming, the longer the project went on, the more questions arose. Was this really sustainable? Could a tech-driven solution provide long-term relief to areas that had been struggling with food insecurity for decades? Some critics began to question whether the technology was the right solution, suggesting that it was too reliant on automation and not enough on building sustainable local food systems. The fear of technology overshadowing human connections resurfaced, and some activists argued that the focus should be on empowering local communities to solve their own problems rather than creating a system that could eventually make people dependent on machines. Elon was used to the critics. He had faced similar skepticism with every venture, from electric cars to space exploration. But this time, the stakes felt higher. This wasn't just about building a successful product, it was about creating a solution to one of the world's most persistent problems. And while he had no illusions that the project was perfect, he knew that this was the only way forward. He responded to the criticism with his usual resolve. Technology doesn't replace human effort, it amplifies it. The point of this project is not to take away jobs or to build a future where machines replace people. It's about giving people the tools to solve problems they've been facing for generations. When people are fed, they have the freedom to focus on building better lives. And technology is the key to enabling that. His response was widely circulated in the media, and while it didn't silence all the critics, it sparked a broader conversation about the role of technology in addressing societal challenges. The more Elon spoke about the potential of his project to empower communities, the more people started to see the bigger picture. But the roadblocks weren't just external. Internally, Elon's team began to feel the pressure as well. Tensions were rising, especially as certain regions began to experience delays and supply chain issues. Ava, in particular, found herself increasingly torn between supporting Elon's relentless pursuit of innovation and managing the day-to-day challenges that came with such a monumental task. "I'm worried that we're pushing too hard, Elon," Ava confessed one evening after a long day of meetings. "We're doing everything we can to solve these problems, but at some point, we need to take a step back and reassess. We can't just keep throwing more resources at this without a plan. The team is starting to burn out." Elon looked at her with a mixture of understanding and determination. "I hear you, Ava. But we're at a crossroads. If we back down now, we risk losing everything. I've always said that progress requires sacrifice. I know it's hard, but we have to keep moving forward. We'll find a way to make it work." Ava sighed. "I know you believe in this, but we can't keep running at full speed without thinking about the long-term sustainability of the operation. If we don't get this right, we could do more harm than good. Elon took a deep breath. I know it's tough. But we're changing the world, Ava. I'm not in this to do things halfway. And neither are you. Let's take a deep breath, reset, and figure out how we can make it work. But we can't stop now. Ava nodded, though the doubt in her eyes remained. It wasn't just about the technology anymore, it was about the lives they were impacting, and the pressure to get it right was weighing heavily on everyone. As the weeks passed, the team continued to push forward, working tirelessly to address the roadblocks that had slowed the rollout. Slowly but surely, the technology began to adapt to the local conditions. The drones became more resilient in harsh weather, the farming systems were tailored to fit different climates, and the supply chain issues were resolved by building partnerships with local suppliers who could help bridge the gap. But even as the project began to gain momentum once again, Elon knew that the hardest challenges were yet to come. He had always thrived in the face of adversity, but this time, the stakes felt higher. The world was watching, and the pressure to succeed was suffocating. But for Elon Musk, there was no turning back now. They had come too far to fail. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the food delivery project continued to grow, new challenges emerged that tested not only the technology but also the relationships between Elon, his team, and the people they were trying to help. The global initiative had started with great promise, but now that it was in full swing, it was clear that the pressure was mounting. The world was depending on them, and each day brought a new test of their resilience. One of the biggest challenges at this stage wasn't the tech, it was the issue of trust. While the drones were working better than ever and the farming systems were adapting to new environments, the people who lived in the areas they were trying to help were skeptical. Many were hesitant to rely on machines, especially in places where traditional farming had been the backbone of the community for generations. In remote villages, some locals were deeply resistant to the idea of food being delivered by drones. They worried that it would disrupt their way of life, taking away jobs and self-sufficiency. They were hesitant to trust a system that they couldn't see or touch, a machine that hovered above their heads, dropping food from the sky. For many, it felt unnatural. Elon knew that to make this work, they needed the buy-in of the people they were trying to help. Without trust, no amount of technology would make a difference. But how could they overcome these deeply ingrained fears and convince people that this was a good thing? One day, while meeting with Ava and the leadership team, Elon posed the question. How do we build trust with these communities? We've got the tech, we've got the food, but we're not going to get anywhere if they don't believe in it. Ava spoke first, her voice tinged with frustration. It's going to take more than just telling them it's safe. They need to see it. They need to believe that this system is designed for their benefit, not to replace them. Elon leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. He had been around long enough to know that technology alone wouldn't solve everything. People were emotional, they were skeptical, and they needed to feel heard. This wasn't just about drones and vertical farms, it was about creating a connection. Maybe we need to bring them in, make them part of the solution, Elon said finally. We can't just fly in, drop food, and expect everything to change overnight. We need to empower these communities to be a part of this process. Ava raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting we involve them in building the system? Elon nodded. Exactly. Let's create local hubs where people can learn how to operate the tech, grow food using the systems, and even help distribute it. If they feel like they have ownership of it, they're more likely to trust it. The team was initially hesitant. It was a bold move, one that would take time and resources to implement. But as they discussed the logistics, they began to see the potential. By involving local communities in the process, they would not only provide food but also offer new opportunities for work and education. It was a win-win. The next step was to build partnerships with local leaders and community members who could act as ambassadors for the project. Elon and his team traveled to remote villages, where they met with local authorities and residents to explain the project and its benefits. The key, Elon knew, was to listen as much as they spoke. This had to be a two-way conversation. In one village, Elon found himself sitting in a small, modest room with the village chief, a weathered man named Kofi. Kofi was skeptical about the project, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You want us to rely on machines to feed us?" he asked, his voice thick with doubt. "Machines don't understand us. They don't understand our needs." Elon smiled, sensing an opportunity to build rapport. "I get it," he said, his tone soft but firm. "But this isn't about replacing your way of life. It's about making sure you never have to go hungry again. Our goal is to help you grow more food with less effort, to make sure that no matter what happens, you can feed your community. And we want you to be a part of this process. We can't do it without you." Kofi stared at him for a long moment before speaking again. "And if we don't want to be a part of it?" Elon's eyes never wavered. "Then we'll figure out another way to help. But I believe this can work if we work together. We're not here to take over, we're here to partner with you. If you have concerns, let's talk about them. We're in this together." Kofi was silent for a while, contemplating Elon's words. Finally, he nodded. "I'll consider it. But the people here won't trust you until they see that you're not just here to take. You'll have to prove that you mean what you say." Elon knew that Kofi was right. Words alone wouldn't change anything. But the first step toward trust had been taken. The next step was showing the villagers, not just telling them, that the project was built with them in mind. Over the following weeks, Elon's team worked tirelessly to implement the new approach. Local hubs were established where community members could learn to operate drones, manage vertical farming systems, and distribute food. They also began training locals to act as field engineers, ensuring that the technology would remain sustainable and adaptable in the long term. To further win over skeptics, the team invited community members to attend food distributions, allowing them to see the technology in action and meet the engineers who were behind it. Slowly, the skepticism began to fade. People saw that the drones were not just machines dropping food from the sky, they were a tool that could improve their lives. The breakthrough came when one of the village's young leaders, Amara, who had been a vocal critic of the technology, came forward to express her support. "I was wrong," she said in front of a crowd of villagers, her voice carrying. "At first, I didn't understand how this could work. But now I see that this isn't about machines taking over, it's about creating something that can help us when we need it the most." Her words resonated deeply with the community. If Amara, someone they respected, could trust the system, then maybe they could too. Elon's approach to building trust, by involving the communities and empowering them to be a part of the solution, was paying off. As more villages came on board and more people began to see the value of the project, the initiative started to take on a life of its own. It was no longer just about Elon Musk and his team, it was about the people who were working together to create a better future. But Elon knew that the hardest part was still ahead. Trust had been earned in small steps, but now it was time to prove that the system could handle the long-term needs of millions. Could this technology truly scale to meet the demands of the world's most vulnerable populations? Would the roadblocks that had delayed the project earlier reappear? The coming months would hold the answers. The trust they had so carefully cultivated in the communities was now beginning to pay off, but even as the project gained traction, there was an undeniable sense of urgency that lingered in the air. Elon knew that while the partnerships were forming and the technology was scaling, there was still the looming question of sustainability, both of the system and the relationships that had taken months to build. As they pushed forward, the weight of the challenges ahead became clearer. The task had evolved into something much larger than they had initially imagined. What had started as a noble effort to address global food insecurity was now a high-stakes venture involving hundreds of thousands of people, complex supply chains, and, of course, intense scrutiny from the media and global leaders. The pressure was on. One morning, Elon received an urgent call from Ava. She sounded unusually serious, her tone clipped. "Elon, we've got a situation. A major supplier in the food chain has backed out. They've pulled out of the contract, and they're citing the pressure of maintaining delivery quotas as the reason. If we don't find a solution fast, we could see a significant delay in distribution." Elon's stomach tightened. He had been prepared for setbacks, but this one hit hard. Without these suppliers, the global food delivery system they had worked so hard to build would be severely disrupted. Every village they had successfully reached, every community that had placed their trust in him, could be affected. "Let's not panic yet. Who do we have on the ground to negotiate?" Elon's voice was calm, but his mind raced. Ava quickly briefed him on the situation, and within hours, a team was on its way to meet with the supplier's representatives. While the logistics team worked to smooth over the issue with the supplier, Elon knew that this moment was a defining one. They could not afford to lose any momentum. This project had to succeed, not just for him, but for the millions of people who were depending on it. It was more than just technology, it was about people, about trust, and about creating an opportunity for a better future. The stakes had never been higher. In the midst of this crisis, Elon had a moment of quiet reflection. He sat at his desk, staring out the window of his office. The weight of the world seemed to rest on his shoulders, but he knew there was no going back. This project had become bigger than just a technological breakthrough, it had become his personal mission. He thought about the people they had met along the way, the villagers who had hesitated at first but then embraced the new system. He thought about Amara, the young leader who had once been skeptical but now stood as a fierce advocate for the project. They had given him hope that even the most resistant communities could be won over through patience, dialogue, and the right incentives. But the question remained, could they continue to adapt the system to meet the growing demand? Could they scale the project to reach even more people before it became too late? As he sat there, the sound of his phone vibrating on the desk broke his concentration. It was a message from Ava. "We've got a temporary solution. They've agreed to continue supplying, but we need to find a long-term fix. It's a band-aid, but we've bought ourselves some time." Elon let out a sigh of relief. It wasn't the permanent resolution he had hoped for, but it was a reprieve. He quickly fired back a message, thanking Ava and the team for their quick work, before heading to a meeting with the leadership team. In the meeting, there was a palpable sense of tension. Ava was there, along with engineers, logistics specialists, and community leaders from the villages they were serving. Elon wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. "We've hit a bump in the road, but I'm confident we can overcome this. Right now, we have two goals. First, we need to stabilize the supply chain, and second, we need to ensure that we can meet the demand as we scale the system. We're not going to let a few obstacles stop us, not now." Ava stepped forward. "We're currently negotiating with other suppliers, but in the meantime, I think it's time we consider more localized solutions. If we're truly going to scale globally, we need to make sure we can source and distribute food from local producers as well as global suppliers. We've built a foundation for this, but we need to invest more in local farming systems and training." Elon nodded. "Exactly. This project is about creating a sustainable ecosystem. We've been focusing on top-down solutions, but now we need to focus on the grassroots level. If we can empower local farmers and distributors, we'll not only solve our supply issues but also create jobs and stimulate local economies." It was a bold strategy, but one that aligned with the very principles Elon had always championed: innovation for the people. The idea of bringing the farming process closer to the communities it served made sense. It would reduce reliance on large, centralized suppliers, create economic opportunities in underserved regions, and ensure that the food delivery system could continue to scale without the same level of risk. The following weeks saw the implementation of this new strategy. Local farming hubs were created in the areas they were serving, where farmers could learn to grow food using the vertical farming systems and integrate them into the broader food delivery chain. In tandem, Elon's team began forging partnerships with local distributors, ensuring that communities could manage their own food systems with the help of the technology. It wasn't an easy transition. There were logistical challenges, especially when coordinating multiple local hubs with the broader global network. But as each region implemented the changes, there was a noticeable shift in the way people viewed the project. They no longer saw it as an external system coming in to fix their problems, they saw it as a way to enhance their existing agricultural practices and make them more resilient. The real breakthrough came when the first fully self-sustained village was able to feed itself and neighboring communities entirely through the food delivery network. With minimal intervention from the central system, they had successfully integrated the tech into their everyday lives. The story of this village spread quickly, and it became a symbol of hope for others. Elon watched as these changes unfolded with a sense of quiet pride. This was more than just a technology project now, it was a movement. He had always believed in the power of technology to create positive change, but now he could see that they were not only feeding people, they were changing the way the world thought about food security. But the path ahead was still uncertain. As the project scaled, new challenges were bound to arise, and Elon knew that the roadblocks they had faced so far were just the beginning. The world was watching, and the real test of the project's impact had yet to come. For now, though, the project was on the cusp of a breakthrough, a turning point that could change the course of food delivery, global hunger, and innovation forever. As the global food delivery project grew, it was clear that the world was beginning to take notice. The buzz surrounding the initiative was growing louder with each passing week, and with it, the pressure intensified. On the surface, everything seemed to be moving in the right direction, trust was building, the technology was evolving, and communities were beginning to thrive. But behind the scenes, a new threat was emerging, one that would challenge everything Elon and his team had worked so hard to achieve. While Elon was laser-focused on scaling the project and addressing challenges with suppliers and logistics, there were others who had taken note of the rapid progress. Competitors in the tech and food industries, many with vast resources at their disposal, were now setting their sights on the same mission, solving global food insecurity. The race had officially begun. One evening, as Elon sat in his office reviewing data on food delivery routes and community partnerships, his phone buzzed. It was an unexpected message from Ava. "We've got a problem. I'm hearing rumors that another company is planning to launch a similar project. They've got big investors and some new tech that might threaten what we're building." Elon's brow furrowed as he read the message. A similar project? He quickly tapped back a response, details. Now. Within minutes, Ava sent over a series of articles and reports about a rival company called Agritech Global, led by a tech mogul named David Coleman. Coleman was a former Silicon Valley entrepreneur who had made a fortune in AI and robotics. The company had quietly been developing a new food delivery system with drone technology and vertical farms, and the reports indicated they were planning a massive global launch. Elon leaned back in his chair, absorbing the information. He had heard of David Coleman before, an ambitious entrepreneur who had always been a few steps behind in the tech race. But this time, things were different. The company had secured millions in funding and had the backing of several high-profile investors. If they were truly able to deliver on their promises, they could easily outpace Elon's team. Ava's follow-up message added to his concern, "We're hearing that they have plans to target the same regions we've been working with. If they get there first, it could set us back months, if not years." Elon's mind raced. They couldn't afford to let this happen, not after everything they had accomplished. He knew that the tech alone wouldn't be enough to outpace Coleman's team. But there was something they had that Agritech didn't, a genuine connection with the communities they were serving. They weren't just delivering food, they were building trust, creating jobs, and empowering people to take ownership of the solution. As the next few days passed, Elon doubled down on his efforts. He gathered his leadership team to discuss a counter-strategy. He knew they had to move fast and smart. In the meeting, Elon stood at the front of the room, the air thick with tension. Everyone knew what was at stake. "We're facing a new kind of competition," he began, his voice steady but firm. "Agritech Global has the resources to scale quickly, but they don't have the same foundation we do. We've built relationships. We've earned trust. We've empowered communities. And that's where they'll fall short." Ava, who had been poring over data about Agritech's plans, spoke up. "They're planning to start by offering food deliveries to major cities, and then expanding to rural areas. They're targeting the tech-savvy population first, which means they could get the momentum they need to push us out of the urban markets." Elon nodded, taking in the information. "Then we need to act faster. We're not just competing with technology, we're competing with our message. If we want to win, we need to show the world that we're more than just drones delivering food. We're about creating a sustainable future, and we need to bring that message to the forefront." In the coming weeks, Elon and his team worked tirelessly to refine their strategy. They knew they needed to act quickly, but they also knew that they had to differentiate themselves from Agritech's approach. The public needed to understand that their project was about more than just convenience, it was about a long-term commitment to solving global food insecurity and creating local economies. Elon took a bold step by announcing a new initiative, a global partnership with local governments and community leaders. The goal was simple: to create more localized farming hubs in key regions, ensuring that food was not only being delivered but also grown and distributed by the communities themselves. The emphasis was on sustainability, local economic growth, and reducing dependency on external suppliers. Elon also made a strategic decision to highlight the human aspect of their project. He began speaking more about the relationships they had built with local farmers, workers, and leaders, emphasizing how their work was helping people in ways that Agritech's approach could never replicate. "We're not just about drones," Elon said in an interview, his voice resolute. "We're about empowering people, giving them the tools and the resources they need to feed their communities for generations. This is a partnership, not just a delivery system." At the same time, Elon's team ramped up efforts to showcase the effectiveness of the technology. They expanded pilot programs to more regions, ensuring that every success story was documented and shared with the world. They knew that word of mouth, combined with tangible proof of success, was their strongest weapon. Despite the heavy competition, the impact of Elon's approach began to show. In regions where Agritech had already launched, Elon's teams were working alongside community leaders, holding open forums, and engaging directly with the people. The results were undeniable. While Agritech had the money and the tech, Elon's team had the people. As more communities came on board, the project's network of supporters grew. But Agritech was not about to back down. David Coleman, determined to stay ahead, began making aggressive moves. He started acquiring smaller food tech startups and offering generous incentives to attract top talent in the industry. The competition was fierce, and as the months passed, the pressure to innovate and scale was suffocating. Elon knew they had to outthink Agritech, not just outscale them. The game had changed. It was no longer just about drones delivering food, it was about building an ecosystem, creating a movement that could withstand any rival, and ensuring that the work they had started would endure. With the rivals' moves becoming more aggressive, Elon knew that the real battle was only just beginning. The next phase of the project would require even more ingenuity, more collaboration, and a relentless focus on the people they were serving. But despite the challenges, one thing was clear: this was not just a race to deliver food. It was a fight for a better, more sustainable future. And Elon Musk wasn't about to let anyone, no matter how big or powerful, stand in the way. The tension in the air was palpable. As Agritech Global expanded its operations, Elon and his team were faced with a mounting challenge that had the potential to derail everything they had worked for. But there was something that kept them grounded, something that no amount of money or technology could replicate. It was the power of community. Elon had always believed that the future of technology was not just about innovation, it was about people. And as agri-tech poured millions into scaling up their operations, Elon saw an opportunity. While they focused on cities and tech-heavy solutions, he knew that the real value lay in the communities that had embraced the project from the start. The focus was no longer just about competing with drones and robotics. It was about connecting with the people on the ground, the farmers, the local leaders, the workers who had a stake in the future. Elon understood that if he could rally these communities around a shared mission, they could fight back against the growing corporate threat. Elon called an emergency meeting with his leadership team. As always, Ava, Lucas, and a handful of key community leaders were present. The mood in the room was grim, but there was also a sense of determination. They knew what was at stake. Elon, Ava said, breaking the silence, we're falling behind. Agri-tech has access to resources we can't compete with, and they're scaling faster than we can keep up. We've got to be smarter, not just faster. But how? Elon leaned forward in his chair, his gaze intense. We're not going to win by simply copying what they're doing. Agri-tech can throw money at this problem, but they don't have the relationships we've built. They don't have the trust of the people in the villages. They don't have us. Ava raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? We're going to double down on our local partnerships. We've been focused on technology and logistics, but now it's time to really integrate ourselves into the communities we're serving. We're going to give them the tools they need to thrive, not just the food. The decision was made. Elon knew that the solution was in empowering local farmers, businesses, and leaders, not just providing them with food, but with the means to grow, sell, and distribute it independently. They would no longer rely solely on a centralized system but instead build a network of self-sustaining communities, each one capable of feeding itself and others in its region. Ava and Lucas worked quickly to identify areas where this model could be implemented. They mapped out regions where the project had already made significant strides and began working with local governments and leaders to form new partnerships. But the real test would come in the villages where agri-tech had already made inroads. Elon knew that they had to show these communities not only the benefits of their technology but also the deep-rooted impact they could have on their lives. It was time to remind them that their mission was about more than just delivery, it was about rebuilding local economies from the ground up. In one of the villages that had been an early adopter of the project, a local farmer named Malik stood before a crowd of fellow villagers. It had been a year since they had first integrated the new farming systems, and the results were undeniable. Crop yields were up, food was being distributed efficiently, and the village was thriving. Look around you, Malik said, his voice strong and filled with conviction. This is our future. We've taken control of how we grow and distribute food, and now we're feeding our own families and our neighbors. The technology we've been given isn't just about convenience, it's about survival. It's about creating something that lasts. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers a testament to the deep connection they had formed with the project. They no longer viewed it as a temporary solution or a handout, they saw it as a way to secure their future, a way to take control of their destiny. Elon watched from the back of the crowd, his heart swelling with pride. This was what he had always hoped for. These communities were no longer dependent on outside forces. They had become self-sufficient, and in doing so, they had become the beating heart of the project. As more and more villages began adopting the self-sustaining model, the message spread. The people weren't just receiving food deliveries, they were becoming active participants in the solution. And as they took ownership of their own food systems, they also took ownership of their futures. They had something that agri-tech could never replicate, true empowerment. The ripple effect was immediate. Villages that had once been skeptical of the project now saw it as an essential part of their survival. Local leaders began to advocate for it, not because it was the latest trend, but because it was something that worked. The technology, once viewed as an external intervention, was now woven into the fabric of their daily lives. As these stories gained momentum, Elon's team ramped up their efforts to publicize them. They shared testimonials from farmers like Malik, highlighting the transformation they had undergone, from being food insecure to becoming food producers. They also showcased the communities that had formed around the project, families that had grown stronger, economies that had been revitalized, and futures that had been secured. The power of community was undeniable. And as the narrative began to shift, the public's perception of the project also began to change. It was no longer just about food delivery, it was about creating a movement that connected people to each other, to their land, and to a future they could shape. Meanwhile, Agritech Global's efforts were beginning to show cracks. Despite their vast financial resources, they couldn't replicate the deep-rooted relationships that Elon's team had formed. Communities that had once been excited by the promise of drones and cutting-edge tech were now beginning to question whether it was worth sacrificing their autonomy. David Coleman, Agritech's founder, realized that the tide was shifting. The company had been quick to scale, but they hadn't built the kind of grassroots support that was crucial for long-term success. The people weren't just looking for a quick fix, they were looking for something more sustainable, something that felt like it was part of their world. Elon's team, however, wasn't sitting idle. They continued to expand the self-sustaining farming model, investing in training programs and creating mentorship opportunities for farmers. The project's message was clear: this was a partnership between technology and people, and together, they could build a new kind of future. As Elon looked out at the village that had once seemed so far from his reach, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This wasn't just a tech project anymore, it was a revolution. A quiet one, perhaps, but a revolution nonetheless. And it was driven by the very people who needed it the most. He knew the battle wasn't over, and there were still many obstacles ahead. But one thing was certain: Elon Musk had always believed in the power of innovation. But now, he was more convinced than ever that the true power of change lay in the hands of the people. The challenges they had overcome were considerable, but in his experience, every success created a new set of hurdles. Elon knew that their expansion would bring them into new territories, both literal and metaphorical, where they would need to navigate political landscapes, cultural differences, and, most importantly, the expectations of people who had no prior connection to the project. They weren't just scaling a tech product anymore, they were scaling a vision. And with that vision came responsibility. It was a brisk Tuesday morning when Elon stood before a newly assembled task force. The room was filled with senior leaders from various parts of the project, including Ava, Lucas, and a few new faces from the finance and international relations teams. The goal was clear: to expand rapidly into several new countries, with a special focus on emerging markets where food insecurity was rampant. "All right, team," Elon began, his voice steady but urgent. "We've proven that this works. But now we need to ensure that our message, our mission, and our values remain intact as we grow. The next phase isn't just about scaling up, it's about scaling right. We have to remain grounded in the principles that got us here." Ava, who had been researching potential new markets, spoke up. "We've identified a few regions where we can make a significant impact: Africa, Southeast Asia, and parts of Eastern Europe. These places have some of the highest rates of food insecurity, and many of them already have infrastructure that aligns with our needs. The question now is how to adapt our model to fit the unique needs of each place." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "We have to remember that this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. We're not coming in with a top-down solution. These communities have their own strengths, their own culture. We need to work with them, not impose on them." As the team discussed strategies for entering these new markets, Elon felt a renewed sense of purpose. The project was no longer just about feeding people, it was about empowering them to control their own futures. They weren't offering charity, they were offering tools for change. One of the key issues they faced in their international expansion was logistics. Delivering food to remote or war-torn areas would require innovative solutions. Elon called together a group of engineers, logistics experts, and local partners to brainstorm ways to get food to places that had long been inaccessible. The answer, as it often was with Elon, came from thinking outside the box. "We have the technology," he said during a strategy session. "But now we need to find ways to use it to overcome the barriers that traditional systems can't address. Let's think about mobile hubs, temporary food stations we can set up in key locations that can serve as distribution points for multiple villages. These could be moved depending on demand and need." Lucas, who had been running the project's logistics team, immediately began to sketch out ideas on a whiteboard. These hubs could be set up quickly using the infrastructure we already have. If we work with local governments to identify areas with the highest levels of food insecurity, we can prioritize these locations. We'll also need to make sure we have the technology to ensure that supplies don't run out. It was clear that, while Elon's focus had always been on the long-term vision, he had never lost sight of the details. The food delivery project was about creating solutions, one step at a time, to tackle some of the world's most pressing issues. The first test came when they decided to roll out a small pilot program in Eastern Europe, a region known for both its agricultural richness and ongoing political instability. This area had seen its fair share of conflicts and natural disasters, which had left many communities dependent on foreign aid. They selected a small town in the Balkans to begin testing the mobile hubs. The region had been hit hard by drought, and local farmers were struggling to grow enough food to feed their families, let alone their neighbors. Elon and his team worked closely with local leaders to design a solution that would address both immediate food insecurity and long-term sustainability. As the mobile hubs were set up and food began to be distributed, the transformation was immediate. Local farmers, initially skeptical, began to see how the technology was helping them streamline their operations. They were able to connect with nearby communities through a new mobile app developed by the team, ensuring that food was delivered efficiently and directly to those who needed it most. Malina, a local farmer who had been struggling to make ends meet, stood in front of one of the hubs, her eyes wide with amazement. "I never thought this would work in a place like this," she said, her voice filled with awe. "But now I can see it, I can see a future where we don't have to rely on aid anymore. This is our chance to take control." It was a poignant moment for Elon. Watching Malina speak, he realized that this wasn't just about feeding people, it was about empowering them to reclaim their futures. In a region torn apart by conflict, they were offering a new kind of hope, one rooted in the very land they had struggled to grow food from. As the pilot program continued to grow, Elon and his team began to receive feedback from local governments. The mobile hubs were proving effective, but there were still hurdles to overcome. Political tensions between neighboring countries made coordination difficult. Local corruption and bureaucratic red tape often slowed down progress. Elon knew these were challenges they would have to face head-on. But he also knew that the team was more than capable of overcoming them. They had the technology, the expertise, and, most importantly, the resolve to keep pushing forward. Back in the United States, the success of the Eastern European pilot program caught the attention of several high-level officials. Governments from around the world began reaching out, offering support, funding, and partnerships. Elon was inundated with calls, each one promising new opportunities, but also posing new risks. The pressure to maintain control and ensure that the project remained true to its mission intensified. But despite the growing demands, Elon remained focused. He understood the importance of this mission, not just for the people they were serving, but for the future of humanity as a whole. The world was changing, and their project had the potential to change it for the better. The growth of the project felt like a double-edged sword. With each new opportunity came new challenges. But there was one thing that remained constant, the belief in the power of community. And as the project expanded into new regions, it became clear that no matter the obstacles, they could never lose sight of the core values that had made this movement so powerful. The days following the successful launch of the mobile hubs in Eastern Europe were a blur for Elon. The team worked tirelessly, tweaking the logistics, refining the technology, and dealing with the bureaucratic challenges that came with expansion. They were starting to see real change, but there was something lurking in the background, a shadow that grew larger with each passing day. The competition, Agritech Global, wasn't content with sitting on the sidelines any longer. David Coleman, the founder of Agritech, had been watching Elon's progress closely. After all, Agritech had initially been the leader in this space, and now they were being outpaced by the more personal, community-driven approach that Elon's team had championed. It wasn't just a matter of technology, it was about the relationship between people and their food systems, something that Agritech had failed to grasp fully. Now, they were desperate to regain control. Elon was aware that this would happen. He knew that as their success grew, so too would the scrutiny. The corporate world didn't take kindly to being outmaneuvered. But he had never been one to shy away from a challenge. The competition, while fierce, didn't intimidate him, it motivated him. He was driven by the knowledge that their project wasn't just about being the best in the industry. It was about creating a new paradigm for how food could be distributed, grown, and consumed. It was about people, not profits. Mr. Musk, the voice on the other end of the line, was familiar but cold. It was David Coleman. "I think we need to have a conversation." Elon leaned back in his chair, exchanging a look with Ava. "Go ahead, David. I'm listening. I'm sure you're aware of the success you've had with the mobile hubs. It's impressive, but I think you've underestimated the power of Agritech. We've been watching your little, community-driven project closely, and we believe we can scale faster and more efficiently than you. We're willing to invest heavily to make sure we lead this market. How about you consider partnering with us instead of continuing this fight? You can join Agritech, and we'll take it from there." Elon's mind raced. David had always been strategic, but this was different. Agritech's financial power could easily overwhelm anything Elon's team had managed to build so far. But this offer wasn't just about money, it was a direct challenge to the very principles that the project had been founded on. Agritech had the resources, but they didn't have the heart of the mission. "David, thanks for the offer. But that's not why we're doing this. We're not just building a company, we're building a movement. And that movement belongs to the people, not the corporations. So no, I won't be partnering with you." The line was silent for a moment. Then David spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You're making a mistake, Elon. You can't beat us. But you can join us. Think about it." Elon hung up, a sense of determination flooding through him. Ava looked at him, her expression one of concern. "Do you think he'll back off?" "No," Elon replied, his voice firm. "He won't. But we're not backing down either. If anything, we've just been given a deadline." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Elon and his team doubled down on their efforts, enhancing the technology, expanding into new markets, and working tirelessly to maintain the integrity of their community-driven approach. But Agritech wasn't going to let this slide. They had already started to launch their own version of mobile hubs, and they were doing so with the full backing of their massive corporate infrastructure. The media attention escalated. Headlines screamed about the growing rivalry between the two companies, framing it as a battle between the underdog and the corporate giant. Social media buzzed with speculation, and both sides began to mobilize their supporters. Elon's team was relentless in their efforts to showcase the positive impact of their model, real stories from farmers, communities, and local leaders about how they were taking control of their food systems and changing their lives for the better. But Agritech, with its deep pockets, wasn't without influence. They started to cast doubt on the sustainability of Elon's model, questioning whether it could scale globally, and whether it was truly feasible for developing countries to rely on a technology-heavy approach. They painted a picture of a future where the reliance on decentralized food systems would only lead to chaos. Elon wasn't fazed. He knew the truth of what they were building. But the pressure was mounting, and he could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. This wasn't just a competition about who could distribute more food, it was a battle for the future of global food systems. And with agri-tech making their move, Elon understood that they were approaching a tipping point. It was in the midst of this growing tension that an unexpected ally appeared. Maria, a former agri-tech executive who had been disillusioned with the company's corporate tactics, reached out to Elon. She had watched the developments from the outside and, after seeing how agri-tech was handling the competition, she knew where her loyalties lay. "Elon," she said in their first meeting, "I know what you're up against. I was there. But I also know what agri-tech is willing to do to win this. They'll stop at nothing. I can help you, but you need to be ready for what's coming." Elon listened intently. Maria offered invaluable insight into agri-tech's operations, its internal culture, and its plans for the future. Armed with this information, Elon knew that the time for subtlety was over. They were in a war now, one that could change the future of food forever. As agri-tech ramped up their efforts, Elon and his team began to formulate their next move. They had something agri-tech didn't, they had the people. And it was time to put that power to work. Their strategy was clear: expand their network of local partnerships even further. They would forge stronger bonds with community leaders, increase transparency, and focus on building a public narrative that was centered around the idea of collaboration, not competition. The next step was bold. Elon decided it was time to host a global summit, a massive event where farmers, technologists, policymakers, and community leaders could come together and showcase what they had accomplished. It would be a moment to remind the world what they were fighting for: a food system that was fair, sustainable, and rooted in community empowerment. The countdown to the summit had begun. And with it, the stakes had never been higher. Elon knew that this was their moment to not only solidify their position but to show the world that no amount of corporate money could replace the power of a united, empowered people. In the face of corporate giants and global pressure, the tipping point was approaching. What came next would change everything. The global summit was set to take place in a grand convention center in New York City. Invitations had been sent to the top minds in the food tech industry, as well as local community leaders, government representatives, and advocates for sustainable agriculture. It was more than just an event, it was a statement, a call to action. Elon knew that this would be the pivotal moment in the battle for the future of food. The goal was simple: to show the world that a more decentralized, community-driven food system wasn't just possible, it was the future. The event was designed to be immersive. From the very first step, guests would be greeted by exhibits showcasing the technologies and innovations that were transforming food systems around the world. Mobile hubs, new farming techniques, sustainable packaging, everything that had been part of their journey was on display. It was more than just a show, it was proof of concept. It was living evidence that their approach was working. The morning of the summit arrived, and the convention center was bustling with energy. Entrepreneurs, farmers, government officials, and tech experts filled the space, exchanging ideas and discussing the future of food. Elon stood backstage, looking out over the crowd, his heart racing. He was excited but also fully aware of the weight of what was at stake. This was the culmination of years of hard work, and now it was time to put everything on the line. Ava, who had been instrumental in organizing the event, walked over to him with a reassuring smile. "We're ready. This is our moment." Elon nodded, but his mind was racing. He had always been confident in their vision, but now he had to convince the world. This wouldn't be easy. As the summit officially kicked off, Elon took the stage to thunderous applause. The crowd settled as he began his address, his voice calm but filled with passion. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today isn't just about technology. It's about the future of food. It's about how we can come together as a global community and create a system that works for everyone. A system where food isn't just a commodity, it's a right." The audience leaned in, hanging on every word. Elon's presence was magnetic, and his vision resonated with the crowd. He spoke about the power of community-driven solutions, the importance of sustainability, and the need to put people first, not profits. For too long, Elon continued, the global food system has been controlled by a handful of corporations, driven by the bottom line. But the truth is, food isn't something to be sold, it's something to be shared. It's something that connects us all, regardless of where we live or how much money we have. We have the tools to change that, and we're already seeing it happen. But we need your help. We need to work together. The crowd erupted into applause. Elon's words had struck a chord with them. This was no longer just about technology, it was about values. And for the first time, it felt like the world was listening. After Elon's keynote address, the summit continued with panel discussions, workshops, and live demonstrations of the food delivery system. Local farmers, who had been part of the mobile hub pilot programs, shared their success stories. They spoke of how their communities were no longer dependent on aid, how they were able to feed their families and neighbors, and how the technology had empowered them to take control of their own food systems. Maria, the former agri-tech executive who had joined their team, moderated one of the panels. She had been instrumental in bringing together key thought leaders who could speak to the impact of the movement. Her experience at agri-tech allowed her to provide a unique perspective on how the industry had evolved, and why Elon's approach was the future. The old system isn't sustainable, Maria said during the discussion. It's built on monopolies, on exploiting farmers, on controlling supply chains. But what Elon and his team are doing is something completely different. They're creating a decentralized system where food is accessible, affordable, and, most importantly, equitable. But as the summit progressed, it became clear that agri-tech was not going to let Elon have the spotlight without a fight. David Coleman, ever the strategist, had sent one of his top executives to represent agri-tech at the summit. His appearance was calculated, an attempt to draw attention away from the community-driven message that Elon was pushing. The agri-tech representative, Charles Thompson, took the stage for a counterpoint presentation. He was suave, confident, and polished, a man who had the look of a corporate powerhouse. His argument was compelling, at least on the surface. We're here today to discuss solutions, not ideals, Charles began. At agri-tech, we believe in scaling innovation to meet the needs of millions. Our system doesn't just reach a few communities, it reaches everyone. We have the infrastructure, the logistics, and the financial backing to ensure that no one is left behind. Decentralized systems, as much as they sound noble, are impractical. You can't change the world with small, local solutions. You need a global approach. The crowd was divided. Some nodded along with Charles, clearly impressed by agri-tech's polished presentation. But Elon wasn't fazed. He had been in the trenches long enough to know that there was more to food security than just scale. When it was his turn to respond, Elon stood up and calmly addressed the room. Charles, I respect your approach. But what we're talking about here isn't just about technology, it's about people. Agri-tech may have the financial backing, but we have the support of communities. We have the trust of the farmers, the families, and the leaders who know that change isn't going to come from the top down, it's going to come from within. The crowd erupted into applause once again. Elon's words were simple, yet powerful. He wasn't just advocating for a new way to distribute food, he was advocating for a new way of thinking about the world. And it was a message that resonated. The summit ended on a high note, with both sides presenting their visions for the future of food. But for Elon, the battle wasn't over. The summit had only been the beginning. Now, it was time to take action. As the crowd slowly filed out of the convention center, Elon stood at the front, watching the faces of those who had attended. Some were skeptical, but many were inspired. The change was happening, and it was happening now. The world was waking up to the fact that food systems could be better, could be fairer, could be more sustainable. And Elon knew that no matter what agri-tech did next, they couldn't take that away. The aftermath of the global summit was a whirlwind. In the days that followed, Elon and his team were flooded with messages of support. Communities across the globe were rallying around the idea of a new food system, one that wasn't controlled by corporate giants, but instead driven by the power of the people. Farmers, local leaders, and activists all echoed the same sentiment: this was a movement that could change the world. It was about access, sustainability, and empowerment, not just profits. However, despite the overwhelming support they received, the battle was far from over. Agri-Tech, while stunned by the summit's outcome, was not about to give up. They quickly moved to counter the momentum Elon had gained, throwing everything they had into damage control. The next major move came in the form of a well-funded media blitz. Agri-Tech poured millions of dollars into a marketing campaign designed to undermine Elon's message. Their ads played on the fears of the general public, warning that decentralized food systems were too risky and unreliable. They painted a picture of chaos, of systems that couldn't scale, of hungry families in remote regions left stranded when mobile hubs failed to arrive. The narrative was crafted to provoke doubt, to cast Elon's vision as naive, and to position Agri-Tech as the only real solution to the global food crisis. But Elon wasn't one to back down from a challenge. He knew the power of storytelling, the power of human connection. Instead of engaging in a direct media battle, Elon decided to take a different approach. He would let the people speak for themselves. A week after the summit, a new video surfaced online. It was raw, emotional, and deeply personal. It featured several farmers from remote parts of Africa, speaking about their experience with the mobile hubs. They shared stories of how the technology had allowed them to grow crops that were once impossible in their regions. One farmer spoke of how his family had been able to send their children to school for the first time, thanks to the financial stability that the system had provided. Another woman spoke of how her community had come together to create a cooperative, sharing resources and knowledge in ways they never thought possible. The video wasn't a polished ad, it wasn't about flashy graphics or corporate branding. It was simply people telling their stories, sharing their truth. It was a raw and powerful reminder of the real-world impact of Elon's vision. And it spread like wildfire. The video went viral, and soon it was being shared across social media platforms by ordinary people who believed in the cause. The response was overwhelming. In just a few days, millions of people had seen the video, and the support for Elon's movement reached new heights. The public wasn't buying the corporate narrative anymore. They were seeing the tangible benefits of a decentralized food system, and they were ready for change. But Agri-Tech wasn't giving up that easily. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, they pulled a move that stunned everyone. David Coleman, the CEO of Agri-Tech, made a surprise announcement that they were acquiring a controlling stake in several key media outlets. They would now have the power to shape the narrative however they wanted. The move was brazen, but it was a calculated one. Agri-Tech had the financial resources to make it happen, and they believed that with the right spin, they could turn the tide back in their favor. Elon's team knew that they had to act fast. If Agri-Tech controlled the narrative, it would be nearly impossible to regain the momentum they had worked so hard to build. It was time for a counterstrike, but it had to be something bold, something that couldn't be ignored. Elon called a meeting with his core team, Ava, Maria, and a few key members of their communications and strategy team. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. I don't want to go head-to-head with them in the media. That's a battle we can't win on their terms, Elon said, pacing back and forth. But we do have something they don't. Ava raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Elon Musk, he replied with a grin. The world's watching. If we do this right, we can turn the spotlight on us, and we don't need to wait for a media company to tell our story. The team began brainstorming. After several hours of intense discussion, they came up with a plan, an audacious one. They would host a live, global broadcast showcasing a massive, real-time collaboration between farmers, technologists, and community leaders in different parts of the world. This would be more than just a presentation, it would be an interactive event, where people could tune in and watch as communities work together to solve real problems using the mobile hubs. The event would be called the Global Harvest, a celebration of what had been achieved, but also a call to action for others to join the movement. Elon knew that this could be the moment that truly set them apart from agri-tech. They wouldn't just be talking about the future of food, they would be living it in real time. The planning process for the Global Harvest was intense. The team coordinated with farmers and community leaders across the globe, securing their participation in the event. Technicians worked around the clock to ensure that the technology was ready for the live broadcast, which would span multiple time zones and involve thousands of viewers. On the day of the event, the energy was electric. People from all corners of the world tuned in, eager to witness the groundbreaking collaboration. The broadcast began with live footage of farmers in remote parts of South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, all using the mobile hubs to harvest crops, communicate with experts, and share resources with one another. It was a seamless, real-time demonstration of how the technology was empowering communities to take control of their own food systems. Elon appeared on screen from a central broadcast location, speaking directly to the camera. Today, we're not just showcasing technology, we're showcasing a revolution in how we feed the world. It's not about corporations or billion-dollar solutions. It's about people, it's about communities, and it's about making sure that everyone has the opportunity to grow their own future. The event was a massive success. It wasn't just a demonstration of technology, it was a powerful testament to the impact that collaboration, empowerment, and decentralization could have on the world. The positive reactions flooded in from social media, news outlets, and influential figures. Even those who had once been skeptical of Elon's approach were beginning to reconsider. David Coleman and agri-tech, seeing the overwhelming response to the Global Harvest, knew they were losing ground. But it was too late. The tides had turned. The narrative was no longer in their hands. The battle wasn't over, but Elon and his team had taken a critical step towards securing a future where food wasn't just a commodity, it was a human right, shared by all. The success of the Global Harvest was more than just a victory for Elon's team, it was a turning point. The event had captured the world's attention, sparked critical conversations, and had shown the true power of a decentralized food system. But it also had an unintended consequence. Agri-tech's continued push to control the narrative was starting to backfire. While agri-tech's marketing campaign had once seemed unstoppable, the world was beginning to see their true motives. People were no longer focused solely on profits and large-scale solutions. They were focusing on the individuals, farmers, communities, and families, who were taking charge of their own food systems. Elon's message was resonating, and it was spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. Yet, the fight was not over. Agri-tech still had resources, influence, and power. Elon knew that to truly secure a future where the global food system was decentralized, they needed something more, a game-changing move that would solidify their victory once and for all. It was in the midst of this critical period that Elon received a call that he had never expected. It was from Maria, his trusted colleague and former agri-tech executive. There had been rumors circulating that Maria's departure from agri-tech hadn't been entirely amicable. After all, she had been one of their top strategists. Yet now, she was offering something that could completely shift the trajectory of the battle. "Elon, I think we need to talk," Maria said over the phone. Her voice was calm but tinged with urgency. "I've been doing some thinking, and I believe there's an opportunity for us to take this fight to a new level. It's a risk, but if we pull it off, we can end this war with agri-tech once and for all." Elon was intrigued, though wary. "What are you suggesting?" Maria took a deep breath before continuing. "I've had some private discussions with key members within agri-tech. There's a faction within the company that's growing disillusioned with David Coleman's leadership. They feel that agri-tech's focus on profit over people is not sustainable in the long term. If we play this right, we could form an alliance with them, an alliance that would make agri-tech's monopoly crumble." Elon paused, considering the offer. An alliance with dissident members within agritech. It sounded almost too good to be true. But he knew better than to dismiss an opportunity without examining it fully. The potential was enormous. If he could recruit the right people from within agritech, it could tilt the balance of power for good. "Let's meet," Elon finally said, his voice resolute. "We'll discuss how we can make this work." The next day, Elon met with Maria in a private location. The meeting was tense, yet hopeful. Maria was cautious with her words, outlining the potential risks of forming such an alliance. If it backfired, they could alienate their supporters and leave themselves vulnerable. But if it succeeded, it would completely dismantle agritech's ability to control the global food supply. Elon listened carefully, weighing the risks. As always, his focus remained on the long-term impact. The success of the movement depended on ensuring that power didn't fall back into the hands of the corporate elites. "We can't let agritech continue to dictate the future of food," Elon said. "But we also need to make sure we don't lose sight of our core values. This has to be about the people, the communities. If we bring them into the fold, we have to be transparent, we have to make them feel that they are part of something bigger than any corporation." Maria nodded in agreement. "Exactly. But if we're going to make this happen, we need to act fast. If we wait too long, agritech will double down on their control over the media, and we'll lose the ground we've gained." Elon agreed, and they quickly devised a plan. The key would be to bring in influential figures from within agritech, individuals who had access to critical information and resources. These people, disillusioned with the corporate culture of agritech, would be willing to help Elon's movement if they were given the right opportunity to make a difference. Together, they could form a new company, a hybrid organization focused on merging cutting-edge technology with sustainable, community-driven food systems. As the days passed, Elon and Maria worked quickly to make contact with key figures within agritech. They focused on a select group of executives, researchers, and engineers who had expressed doubts about the company's direction. After several secret meetings, a few crucial figures agreed to join the cause, bringing their expertise and resources with them. It was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. But even as they celebrated their growing alliance, Elon knew they needed to be cautious. The corporate world was ruthless, and agritech would not let go of their monopoly easily. The next move had to be calculated, precise, and powerful. Elon and his new allies decided to hold a press conference. This wasn't just any press conference, it was a public declaration that agritech's days of dominance were over. With Maria by his side, Elon would introduce the world to the new alliance, a coalition of former agritech executives, technologists, and community leaders who were committed to creating a new food system. The announcement was nothing short of groundbreaking. As the press conference unfolded, Elon spoke to the cameras with an unshakable confidence. "We've been told for years that large corporations are the only ones capable of feeding the world. We've been told that only massive, centralized systems can ensure food security. But today, we're here to show you that there is another way," Elon said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "The future of food is not in the hands of a few powerful companies. It's in the hands of the people." Behind him, several former agritech executives and tech experts stood proudly, each one a testament to the change that was coming. They were no longer bound by corporate greed. They had joined the movement to create a food system that was equitable, sustainable, and community-driven. The press conference rocked the food industry. The media was abuzz with the news, and the public reaction was overwhelmingly positive. The alliance had given Elon the credibility he needed to take his message to the next level. Back at agritech's headquarters, David Coleman watched the press conference unfold with a sense of disbelief. His grip on the industry was slipping faster than he could control. The internal rebellion that had been brewing was now in the open, and it was clear that Elon had taken the upper hand. In a panic, David called an emergency meeting with his top executives. The company's future was at risk, and they needed to find a way to fight back. But it was too late. The tides had turned. And there was no going back. The morning after the press conference, the world felt different. Elon Musk's coalition had achieved the unthinkable. They had shattered Agritech's stranglehold on the global food system, and the ripple effects were being felt all across the globe. The media, once loyal to Agritech's narrative, was now scrutinizing their every move. Elon's vision had won, and now it was time to rebuild the future from the ground up. Across social media platforms, news outlets, and forums, people from all walks of life were joining the movement. The hashtag Food for All was trending worldwide, as communities rallied around the idea of food sovereignty. Farmers, technologists, activists, and everyday citizens were engaging in open discussions about the potential of decentralized food systems. It wasn't just about technology, it was about empowerment. It was about giving people the tools to take control of their own food supply. The global hunger crisis was still very much a reality, but there was now a glimmer of hope. Elon had set a precedent, showing that if enough people banded together, they could bring about real, lasting change. The idea of a sustainable food system, where power was in the hands of the people, wasn't just a pipe dream, it was becoming a reality. But while the public celebrated, there was still work to be done. Agritech, though shaken, wasn't defeated yet. David Coleman had been forced to step down in disgrace after the internal collapse of the company, but the remnants of Agritech still had considerable influence. Elon and his team knew that while they had won the narrative battle, they needed to continue fighting the practical fight for implementation. In the weeks following the press conference, Elon's team worked tirelessly to ensure that the technology behind the decentralized food system was accessible to everyone. They collaborated with governments, local communities, and non-profits to roll out mobile hubs, secure seed banks, and education programs on sustainable farming practices. It was a massive undertaking, but Elon had always believed that the future of humanity was worth fighting for. Elon was now on a different kind of mission. It wasn't just about technology, it was about fostering collaboration between people from different parts of the world. From the very beginning, he had known that this fight wouldn't be easy, but he had also known that humanity could rise to the occasion. What had started as a battle to stop one company's monopoly had now transformed into a movement to empower billions of people. At the same time, Agritech's loyalists were regrouping, forming underground factions that still believed in their old model. There were whispers of secret meetings, and rumors that some of the most influential players in the industry were planning to regroup under a new name. But Elon wasn't concerned. He had proven that the people's will was more powerful than any corporate structure. The movement had already gained too much momentum to be stopped. One of the most powerful moments of the aftermath came when Elon visited a rural village in India. It had been a year since the mobile hubs had been deployed there, and the difference was striking. The village had gone from struggling with food insecurity to becoming self-sufficient. Local farmers were now able to exchange knowledge and resources through the system, growing crops that had once been impossible in the area. Families were thriving, and children were going to school instead of working in the fields. It was a testament to what had been achieved, a vision turned into reality. Elon stood with the community leaders and farmers, listening to their stories. One woman, whose family had lived in poverty for generations, smiled proudly as she spoke about her newfound ability to grow healthy crops and provide for her children. "I never thought this day would come," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "We are no longer dependent on anyone but ourselves. We've taken control of our future." Elon smiled, feeling a sense of pride that he hadn't experienced before. This wasn't just about winning a battle, it was about creating something that would leave a lasting legacy. It was about changing the world for the better. Back in the United States, the government began to take notice. With the success of Elon's decentralized food system becoming undeniable, political leaders from both sides of the aisle expressed interest in supporting it. New laws were being passed to incentivize sustainable farming practices and decentralized food distribution systems. There was talk of integrating this new model into existing food assistance programs, making it easier for struggling communities to access resources. Elon's movement had created a new paradigm, a future where people had the power to feed themselves, where food was not just a commodity but a human right. He had sparked a revolution, but it was a revolution of collaboration, not conflict. It was a future of hope, where technology and community worked together to solve some of humanity's most pressing challenges. As Elon stood at the front of a packed auditorium, preparing to give his final address for the Global Food Initiative, he reflected on how far they had come. What had started as a controversial vision had become a global movement. And though the road ahead was still filled with challenges, Elon knew that the people, those who had believed in the cause from the beginning, were now more powerful than any corporation, any government, or any industry. The future of food was no longer in the hands of the few, it was in the hands of the many. And that was the greatest victory of all. The journey isn't over, Elon said as he addressed the crowd, his voice steady and confident. But today, we can say, with certainty, that we have made history. We have proven that when we come together, anything is possible. We are changing the world, one meal at a time. The crowd erupted into applause, and as the cheers filled the auditorium, Elon knew that this was only the beginning. The movement he had started was no longer just about food, it was about the power of humanity to shape its own future. And nothing, not even the most powerful corporations, could take that away. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?